you can play with outside.
There, I had to put it somewhere. When I was a kid, the PSP was one of the coolest things in gaming. I mean, it was basically a portable PS2 for all intents and purposes. That's a great pitch. It had a wider screen with a higher resolution and more power than the DS and Game Boy, plus an analog stick. I mean, who wouldn't want that? Well, it turns out a lot of people because it got destroyed in the handheld market. It didn't sell terribly, but compared to the heights reached by the DS and Game Boy, yeah, it lost pretty hard. I guess that's why so many PSP exclusives got ported to the PS2, because if you have the third place handheld and the still first place home console, why not bring it over? You know, that just makes sense. Change the aspect ratio, polish up some assets, program use for more buttons, bada bing, brand new budget title fresh for the shelves. Especially titles that were tied to larger franchises like Jak and Daxter The Lost Frontier, Secret Agent Clank, Silent Hill Origins, etc. But of course, there were smaller titles that decided to take the chance on the bigger system, and one of them was Tokobot. This was a cute puzzle platformer developed and published by Tecmo in 2005, which was brought to the PS2 not even a full year later as Tokobot Plus Mysteries of the Karakuri. Honestly, this is something I've been wanting to play through since I found it, since it looks super cute and is apparently 100% games. Whatever that's supposed to mean. Still, despite those two facts, I never seem to get very far before I shelve it again. I'm determined to get through it this time though. And also, the game I was going to review was just being too much of a hassle, so that's probably enough reason to take a look at this instead. No, that's not the right attitude. There's almost always something good to find when digging through the console's more unknown library, so let's pop it in. It starts up with an animated intro scene, meaning they were lying when they said it was 100% game, so I throw it in the trash and eat some caramel. Once I put it back in the console and get to the title screen, it immediately gives off the air of a lesser-known Saturday morning anime I'd find on Cartoon Network in the early 2000s. I might as well get that out of the way right at the start. This game's presentation is just really charming. The designs and art style make this feel like it was adapted from something in the vein of Bakugan or Beyblade, a show meant specifically to sell some kind of collectible toy to kids, maybe some kind of pseudo-Transformers thing where the Tokobots come with accessories to give them new forms. I would have bought that. The character portraits especially, I love. They have such bright colors and just enough detail to look cutesy and bring across a character's personality right away. This doesn't really go for the graphics themselves since the environments you explore are pretty dull. They're supposed to be ancient ruins, but considering the bright and cheery style of the character art, it kinda leaves me disappointed. Lots of grays, browns, nothing like the eye-catching colors of the character models themselves. Some areas are really nice, but for the most part, it's just meh. I'm willing to cut it some slack because it's originally a PSP game. The visuals look perfectly fine for what they're going for. Anyway, that little spiel out of the way, we hop into the cartoonishly round boots of Bolt, a young boy who shares a special bond with these little guys called Tokobots, and aspires to be the world's greatest treasure master. See, in this world before civilization, there was an age known as the prehistoric. During this time, there was already a civilization, so I throw the game in the trash again and eat some more caramel before coming back to hear the rest of the setup. As typical with ancient, long-gone cultures, they made a bunch of amazing technology that's still somehow much better than what we have now, but it was lost to time and what are now the ruins dotted around the kingdom. With the power of this ancient knowledge at stake, treasure masters were established to explore and protect these ruins from those who would use the ancient technologies for evil. Again, man, does it feel like something I would have watched on Saturday mornings, but in a good way. I'm always up for stories about ancient technology. It's almost always a neat plot device, if pretty cliche. Bolt's assisted in his journey by Navigator Ruby, Professor Canewood, his teacher Fuel, and Dr. Viola.
Hello, nurse!
Later on, you meet villains like Flames and Bart, who are constantly plotting something to do with the ruins. They're all pretty much what you'd expect them to be like. Ruby is spunky but unsure, Canewood's wise and a bit silly, Fuel's strict but reasonable, and Bolt, well, he doesn't really have a character. It's really odd, but he has no dialogue outside of, I think, reading the chapter title cards, which I guess is fine since it saves him from the writing. Yet again, it feels like a cartoon, but one that really patronizes its viewers. No one goes so far as to blatantly explain their personalities, but they do spell out just about everything else.
In the laboratory, We call them magnets.
What, are magnets not a thing anywhere else in this world?
Watch out, Bolt! Someone's there!
Oh, really? You don't say.
Oh my, long time no see.
We saw you like maybe yesterday. What are you talking about, long time no see?
You might be able to damage it if you attack that spot.
Oh, really? That's how I win? I was gonna make it finger sandwiches and hold a tea party. I get this is for kids, but this is going a bit too far in terms of hand-holdiness. It certainly doesn't help how they introduce the main MacGuffin halfway through and it's just called the power to control the world. Like, really? You couldn't have bothered making up a better name? Why not the Zero Engine? Or the King's Machine? Heck, just call it the Pluton for all I care. But why is its name just a description? This isn't a modern light novel title. And they read this out so many times and it just sounds so awkward.
The power to control the world.
The power to control the world.
Power to control the world.
Power to control the world?
You know, I've always wanted to date a girl named...
The power to control the world.
Power to control the world?
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
So what's it do exactly? Well, let's let the game explain it.
The power to control the world is a legendary power.
I don't even know why I bothered. Look, it's just a thing you need to go find because it's a video game, and if it didn't exist, we wouldn't have a video game. So what do you do in this video game? Well, the whole game is centered around mechanics with your little robot pals called Tokobots. At the press of a face button, they'll take on a different formation, and you can hold down the R1 button to have them lock up and perform special tasks, and summon them back if they fall off a ledge.
Joint is the process of pressing the R1 button.
Heck yeah, it is! Joints are where you can use special functions. Having them all line up behind you like baby ducks lets you SLAM them down in front of you. This is your basic attack and what you'll be using to latch onto magnetic ledges or swing from magnet poles. Then there's the circle that lets you pull off a ground pound. This one's mainly used for hitting ground switches, but it also gives you a higher jump late in the game. Finally, you can line them up on either sides and spin around to hit enemies and start gears. Later on, you even unlock a kind of hover move, letting you slow your fall and extend jumps. What's this one called?
The Toko Screw.
Wait a second, but this is E for everyone. Using these three forms, you'll explore a handful of different ruins until you can't progress anymore, typically shown with a contextual panel you can't access yet. These unique panels mean you need a specific transformation to proceed, so they're used to pace out the levels, requiring you to return after you find an appropriate tablet. They're basically minigame interludes, like a gear that's pretty much an old Mario Party section, a catapult to take out out-of-reach obstacles, and the
Mono Choo-Choo.
I really want to know how the voice actors reacted to needing to say that line with a straight face so many times. These aren't really anything special, but they all have their own unique annoyances. The train sections especially, since you need to restart a whole section if you fail a run. They're never very long, but the lack of reaction time to some obstacles and length of some jumps make it feel more like a test of patience than reflex. The gear isn't too obnoxious, but it did get on my nerves when attempting a room and falling off again and again, since it warps you back to the previous room for some reason, so I have to keep doing this over and over again. Why? The catapult is the easiest one, no real complaints about it. Unlike the Crane-O-Matic, which is just so incredibly frustrating. I don't know why, but for some reason this thing keeps letting go of boxes as soon as I grab them. Like, why? Why? The one thing it does, and it can't even do it properly. These aren't really the point of the game. The vast majority of what you'll be doing is tackling rooms with your jointing techniques. Tokobot can best be described as a series of platforming or puzzle challenge rooms laid out in a linear path. And if there's one aspect I dislike about the design right off the bat, it's how this puzzle platformer leans more on the platformer aspect than the puzzle. There aren't many neat brain teasers I found. Most of the rooms are closer to reflex obstacle courses than straight up puzzles. Maybe that's just disappointing for me. I love puzzle games, and this one seemed like it would be really fun with the unique mechanic of using your bots, but it's more about timing jumps, swings, and positioning. Early on, there's a little pathway you have to walk covered with eye tablets, and you need to use the circle jointing to walk by without looking at them, since jointing locks your orientation. That was more of what I was hoping for from this game, but sadly, those kind of obstacles are few and far between. Heck, one puzzle is literally just playing a bit of irritating stick. The best challenges you can find in this game come from the challenge rooms. I mean, at least that's appropriate. These are little portals found throughout each level, and they let you enter a very blue world for a chance to find rare treasures, which can be exchanged for high amounts of money back at the lab, including the camera obscura. So, Does that mean this takes place in the far future of Fatal Frame? That'd be interesting. Some of these were cool when they focused on using the mechanics in interesting ways, like the one where there's an invisible platform and you have to stay jointing to know where they are since you can't fall off ledges while jointing, but most of them are more irritating than fun, with stricter timing and more obnoxious distances. Like here, I need to get to this platform beneath me. Problem is, I can't jump from the edge where I would be facing the long magnet ledge, so I need to jump off the side and hit the little magnet on the side of the platform, which is much smaller and harder to hit. This took so many attempts because I had to jump ever so slightly and swing at the perfect time without hitting the platform up top and breaking away all of my bots. And even if I do all that, I still have to hope I was accurate enough to slap the magnet. It wasn't pleasant, to say the least. This isn't the only instance of the mechanics working against you. There were so many moments where your ability to control Bolt and the bots is just too limited. The controls themselves are super clunky, and there are several quirks that make it even more frustrating to control. Your attack swing is a bit too slow, your spin can be stopped by anything nearby when you start up. Your magnet swing has no momentum and can't be altered, so it's a pain to aim accurately. And then there are the camera controls. First off, you can only control it at 2 speeds. It's either moving or not moving. You only have 2 distances away from Bolt, and for some reason, maybe this is a personal thing that really bugs me, but the x-axis is inverted, but the y-axis isn't. And that just annoys me to no end. Obstacle rooms can be especially annoying when enemies get involved, like this stupid floating blade thing. Screw this thing, constantly knocking me off platforms and making me restart the room. Cut this! Oh yeah, there are enemies in this game. Even worse, there's straight up combat. You handle them the same way as the puzzles, taking a certain formation to deal damage. A fine idea on paper, but they take so long to take out. Like, it'd be fine if they just took 1 or 2 hits and disappeared. Like, that'd be fine. They wouldn't be much of an obstacle, and you could just hit them and move on. But it isn't long before they need 5 or more, and why? That is so tedious. Why does this little wind-up toy need to be hit like 6 times before it goes down? The battle arenas they make you do sometimes are just utter baloney. You can get knocked off this platform and need to redo the whole thing, and on the right side, you at least unlock some super forms called overdrives to help out. There's the samurai hover, the mega hammer, and the super tank. You build up energy in this meter up top by smacking things and then hit R2 to activate them. They're just a quick little super attack, but they help out so much in combat. You can even upgrade them back at the lab, but it takes so much money to get them to level 3. You can even buy upgrades to how many you can charge at once, as well as your maximum health. These certainly make the game a bit easier, but they don't help to make it more fun. There are also boss fights against robots with silly names like Dongle, Tankaloo, and
You're too slow!
They're okay. I don't really have much more to say about them, really. Some of their attacks are kind of annoying, and the one against Fuel is super irritating because of the aforementioned pole swinging pains. Oh right, Fuel's evil. Spoilers, but I guess you could have told that by his red eyes and all his portraits constantly looking down his nose. He's supposed to be this super intelligent historian determined to find the power to control the world, and you can beat one of his phases by literally walking a circle around him. My favorite boss was actually Bart, because the arena is themed after a feudal lord's chamber, and his robot's attack is bowing. That was super charming, although it doesn't make much sense being in a European castle. Maybe he's just a massive weeb. And yeah, that's basically it as far as gameplay goes. You pick a ruin, fumble through some puzzles or platforming rooms, break open pots that I'm sure have historical value, but apparently not enough to save them from being shattered, and bash enemies until they pop. Then you go back to the lab to sell whatever treasure you found, upgrade your overdrives if you have the cash, save your game, then go through another ruin. Rinse and repeat until credits. I guess there's also the time trials, but I only ever did one before I realized they probably weren't worth my time. It's neat to revisit stages with later game powers, but I didn't get much for doing it besides a little extra money and some concept art to buy in the shop. Even the final level isn't very interesting. Spoilers real quick, because I want to talk about the ending. Skip to the time on screen if you don't want to hear for whatever reason. So after you inspect Fuel's secret lab and read his diary, you find a radar and some more info on how to find the power. Turns out all those segments you've been finding throughout the game are parts to a special key that can unlock another ruin containing the power. Thanks to some documents picked up along the way, we learned the power was basically an ancient equivalent to a nuclear deterrent, if you will. It apparently has the power to stop the planet's rotation. Oh yeah, there's this guy called Taji who shows up every now and then to fight you. He doesn't really do anything. He's just kind of there. And that's all I'm gonna say about him. So Bolt gathers the remaining segments and heads back to the first location we saw in the game. That was actually pretty cool. I like when games do that. Once he goes through a boss rush, we fight Fuel again, who realizes the evil thing he was going to do was evil, and he didn't even know what the power did. I'm not kidding. He literally had no idea what the super ancient ability could do, but thought it would be able to end war somehow. Ah, yes, I see. This will most definitely put an end to war. But where's the manual? So you fight him and move on to the final boss, this big imposing robot named Zero. Hey, that's not Zero. It's not even red. I joke, but the lore reason we're given from this girl, her name is Arya by the way, states he was shut down by the ancients due to being unable to distinguish good from evil. So I guess it's kind of like Mega Man. The fight isn't even all that hard. He just sits in the chair and shoots lasers at you, which you guide to these little floating panels. Once they're gone, he summons some little orbs around him for you to smack. After hitting each twice, you win. Congrats, the world is saved. Now you can head back to the lab where Ruby bakes full apples into a mound of pie dough. Ruby, sweetie, that's not a pie. What cookbook are you using? And that's Tokobot, or at least the PS2 port, and I have to say, I can see why I didn't stick with it very long until now. This game has quite a few charming aspects to it, like the art style and cartoonish plot, but the general frustrations with its gameplay just felt worse and worse when it hit those points. I almost feel like the PSP game was decent, but made worse by moving it onto a home console. You know that one optical illusion where you take two circles of the same size and color, but make one appear smaller by containing it within a bigger circle? That's what Tokobot Plus feels like, a small circle that feels smaller due to the expectations of a home system. If I could just pick it up and play it for a bit, then it would be fine. That's probably why the levels aren't long and still loaded with save points. But by playing it for a longer period of time, the annoyances only become more obvious and grating. Maybe if I played it in bits and pieces, like say, on a handheld, it would be better. But I only have the PS2 version, and I think it's really kind of disappointing. That's not to say it's totally bad. I think it has some cool ideas that would make for a neat little title even today. And it wasn't always annoying. I actually had some fun with